you doing getting involved in the wars in Europe? When you can't solve base, here is Zimbabwe. Ixakile is Zimbabwe.
Welcome to Mkukwini. Sicela ukwamukela, sicela ukubonga ukuthi uhlale nathi on this very, very cold, freezing day in Johannesburg. We are recording this episode on June 16th, Young People's Day. Sawubona kunjani sis MANDISA?
Sawubona Putsiso njani?
I'm blessed, I'm great, I'm positive, I'm excited, and I'm glad that we are reconnecting again.
Yes, no, definitely. I'm super happy as usual. Just sorry that we started late. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think I have a lateness disease. And I've been working on it for the last, I don't know how many years, maybe my entire life. Some people think I'm punctual, but I feel that punctuality is like 15 minutes before the meeting or the work or whatever. So I'm working on that. So next time we'll start a lot earlier.
A professional like you, I wouldn't expect you to be late for anything.
I know. I'm like a little perfectionist. And that reputation often works against me.
Ne?
Yeah, because people have this perception that I'm like this organized person who's got it all together, who knows what's going down in her life and who's never ever late. I mean, when I was confessing my lateness, because it's an issue that I'm working on. And when I work on something, I like to bring people close to me on board to say, look, I'm working on this and that so that they understand and they can support me, encourage me. Yeah, but yeah, having a perfectionist reputation is not a good thing.
I was actually saying that I think it's the 46th, if not the 47th law on the 48 laws of power.
Yeah.
Ukuthi never appear or never seem to be too perfect.
Yes.
You know, you just gotta seem like you're like everybody else. Have your own flaws. It's okay.
Because nobody's perfect, nothing is perfect. And so if you give off this perfection, you're actually working against the grain. Because one, you're not perfect. You're never ever going to be perfect. Like perfection is like this almost utopia that we all aspire towards, but nobody can really attain perfection. And there's no need for perfection. Life is beautiful.
I like
with
that.
its imperfections, you know.
I'm gonna ask you to come a little bit closer because I want the people to hear you.
Okay.
Microphone.
Is that better?
Yeah. All right.
Lifted.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the first thing, let's start with today.
Yeah.
We're recording this while people are out and about. People are hanging out at home. It's a holiday for some.
Yeah.
For some, this day means a lot. June 16, Youth Day. Your meaning, what comes to your memory, and what can you share on the podcast about June 16?
I guess, we have to be eternally grateful, you know, for the fact that we finally got a very imperfect freedom, politically at least, but we eventually got it thanks to obviously the young, pupils who decided to join their parents and basically escalate the battle, in 1976. We all know it started long before and all of that. It was a build-up, but a campaign is a campaign. And I think we just have eternal gratitude to all the young people who actually participated and the communities who suffered as a result of all that violence. And of course, at the time, it was a correct call to reject the dominance over, the entire nation using a language, whether that language belonged to a minority group or it belonged to a majoritarian group, it doesn't matter, but you can't impose language or anything on a human being, Yes, we all need to be responsible. Young people need to learn a greater sense of discipline, responsibility, etc., because life is long. It requires you to learn the right skills and the right attitude to carry you through its difficulties, but we really do. I'm eternally grateful to the people who fought that battle. For that time, it was the necessary thing to do. Now the game has changed for young people, but I suppose to some extent it's still relevant to commemorate the day and just note it, purely for also the fact that a lot of people died, and many young people actually suffered long-term beyond that because they dropped out of school. Some didn't go back to school because if you remember, school started being shut down almost every 6 months for lengthy periods after 76, well into the 80s. Yeah, I remember 1983, or was it 1984, when schools in all major townships actually completely shut down in the country. So it's not just the immediate loss of opportunity for the students of 1976, but some of them are probably still living today with the scourge or the impact or the implications, consequences of them losing out on schooling for, for like sort of indefinitely. And so I don't think it's something that we should downplay, just because politicians use the day to, mobilize society and communities around very narrow-minded goals. We shouldn't be, demoralized by that. I think the youth today, young people today, should use this time to reimagine a future for themselves and redefine what are the things that they need to work on and which sort of struggles do they need to mount, probably on a different level, because we can't, always be going for physical conflict and beating each other up and bombing buildings, etc. But the struggle has to mature. It has to develop. It has to morph into something that will suit the progressiveness that is necessary for the current day and for the future.
There's a narrative that is coming out right now that says actually the ANC hijacked 1976. And I think it was probably made popular by the Honorable Mr. Julius Malema.
That the ANC hijacked. Look, I mean, the ANC was, all political parties were banned, right? Because I can't remember when they were banned. I think they might have been banned in 1960 or 1959. So black people couldn't politically organize formally, obviously secretly, under the auspices of a church or social grouping, or under the auspices of, I think what was popular at the time, labor issues, or anything else really, except politically defined, discussions, discourse, activities, campaigns. So technically, it's wrong to say that the ANC hijacked June 16 because they couldn't possibly have done that. That's number one. Number two, because they were banned like all other political parties and organizations and formations, they can't be accused of that, because if you look at old images, which will mostly be television footage from the time, as well as photographs that were taken by photographers, of what was happening around that year leading up to the actual June 16 massacre and beyond, there's none with, branding or colors or emblems or slogans or anything really that directly speaks to the physical brand of the ANC, right? So I wouldn't agree with that interpretation.
And there's actually a comment from Times Live that says the PAC condemned Mr. Julius Malema for accusing. Actually, no. Let me not read all of this article.
Yeah.
I was actually looking for the actual comments.
Yeah.
And he was not necessarily talking about the actual day back in 1976. He says over the years.
Yes. Oh yes, like post and using it as who doesn't, and who has ownership of it. So I think sometimes when an entity or someone takes advantage of an opportunity, right, to raise discourse around a certain issue, and then they use their brand to sort of cover that discourse. We shouldn't take that as a fight. It's almost like when you're fighting over who experienced more pain than who.
Yeah.
Like we often do that,
Yeah.
and I find that even in our man versus woman struggles.
Yeah.
There's often you lose sight of what is the issue really. That is the problem that needs. What's the problem that needs a solution, or that we need to actually highlight? And instead of discussing the problem and the solutions, of course, because being stuck on problems is also very outdated and boring, quite frankly, because if you keep focusing on a problem, all you become is a complainer. A problem must be looked at in light of solutions, right? So I think it's wrong to punish the ANC in this regard, in terms of this question, for their own initiative to design campaigns and programs and make claims. Because as much as the ANC was banned and all other political parties were banned at the time, up until political parties were unbanned in 1991, right? When former President Nelson Mandela was released from prison. I think that was the year of the unbanning, and everybody was in exile, was then welcomed into the country, and black people were now allowed to travel outside of the country, because that's why we have that clause in the constitution that says everyone is allowed to leave the country, because before 94, black people were not allowed to leave the country freely, right? And so I think that's I'm not commenting on the person that you quoted, because I generally don't do that as a rule of thumb. But I think in general, for all of us to let's make an example with the pain and the torment really that the people of Marikana have gone through since that massacre, right? And everything that led up to the massacre.
And the Phoenix massacre as well.
Phoenix, anywhere in the country.
Because I think it gets downplayed, but anyway.
It gets downplayed quite a lot, because it hasn't been in the public discourse, and we still need to hear more about, has there been maybe not a commission, but an investigation to really try and locate some of the guilty parties, because that was crime, right? And it's a criminal thing that needs to be criminally investigated. I just think that it's unfair for me or you or anyone to want to monopolize a tragic event, especially that happens as a result of failure to control human emotions and to control crowds and to control political discourse, etc., etc. I really don't think it's fair, as much as I don't think it's fair to say any political party, including the ANC and especially the ANC, that seeks to use that opportunity. Because remember, the ANC and all the other political parties were banned. But we all know they were mobilizing underground. That's how we all knew the ANC, even though we didn't see any vestiges of the ANC. We didn't see branding, but we all knew what the colors of the ANC were. How did we know that? As kids. We all knew that at the time. I think they had the 3 stripes.
Yeah.
They had nothing else. It was their colors, right?
Yeah.
The black, the green, and the gold. And that's all it was. It was just a flag with the 3 colors. And we all knew that. And there was a time also in the early 80s when people started circulating President Nelson Mandela's picture
with the eyes blurred, right?
And then there would also be fights about that picture, because then others would be like, no, that's not him, I've got the real picture, you know what I mean? So I think it's just a characteristic of black society that needs to start winding down, causing division. Like we're so good at that, at dividing ourselves and our collective common issues. There's no need to do that. The sooner we can start thinking about ourselves as, especially Pan-Africanists like to talk about, we are all one, we are all African. But in South Africa, that's not the experience. We are terribly divided, not just because of economic class divisions, but we are also divided socially, politically, religiously, we're culturally, in the entire social framework, we're very, very divided, to the extent that we want to be divided on issues that require us to actually come together and take the best minds among us to solve a problem. By now, the massacre of Phoenix should have been resolved, at least from a criminal investigation and prosecution point of view, so that you remove the politics just for a little while, deal with the criminality, right? That can't happen because we are using it as a ball, and in that process there's no justice and there's no sense of closure and peace and comfort for the families and all the affected and impacted people who lost loved ones, breadwinners, children, etc. in that massacre. And so I think the issue of who owns what needs to stop, because also, by and large, with the exception of how the massacre in Phoenix came up, because I've got very strong issue that I take with mobilizing terror activities, because that was an organized activity, the looting. It didn't happen on its own. It was funded. It was well organized.
So it was funded?
Yes, it was.
Is it?
Yes, it was definitely
How
funded.
do you know that?
I know for a fact because I think on day 2 or 3, after it started, I was invited to, if I can say the name of the radio station, can I say it?
Yeah.
Power FM
invited
me to speak on that massacre, what my views were about it, looking at it. And so just before that, I had to obviously because I was not in an affected area. I had to, make calls and speak to people who were in affected areas to understand what's going on. But I also got not an anonymous call, it's somebody that I know who called me to tell me that in KZN they were offered, like it was a young person, they were offered money by certain people to fill buses. But this is before the actual activity started, the actual looting. And they realized only on the day that, oh, this is what actually we were being asked to participate in. But they were coercing them with money. They were saying, they were offering them, if I remember very clearly, they were being offered 20,000 Rand to fill a bus, right? And then food and alcohol that would then come with a bus. And that's all that they were being offered. And the reason they became suspicious is because usually in South Africa, we know the people who mobilize are churches to a small extent, but mostly political parties who will invite people to attend things, right? Their own programs. And so they asked these people, so why are we organizing people? What kind of people are you looking for? And they didn't give them a criteria for, age demographic or whatever. They just said, just get people, young people, into, fill the bus, and we'll give you details on the day. So all they were asking them to do is to organize the logistics, get the people, organize pickup points, etc. And this is how much money they would be paid. 20,000 Rand was just to fill the bus. Then they were offering them a bonus for, I don't know, whatever else, but they were not giving them the details. And that's how I know about it. And I'm not the only person who had access to that kind of information. Lots of other people had that information, but at the time, people were not willing to come forward because they were a bit scared. I mean, we all thought some sort of civil war is, in the process of unraveling. We were all really, I was frightened when that looting started, and we started seeing the visuals on TV, and so you understand that the divisions, which is the point I was making earlier, the divisions that we create around, and I was saying, let's set that issue aside of the looting, because that was something with a really evil intention, and it played itself out in that way that you could tell that the intention is just to destroy. But when it comes to issues of other forms of violence and civil conflict, even conflict that has weapons and people die, those are not the kinds of activities that should actually divide us and that we should use to politicize our particular ideology if we come from whatever political formation. Because those issues normally, like June 16 and the entire youth uprising in the 70s, that happened because there were real, tangible issues that young people were affected by, which still affect young people today, except for the language and the issue of freedom and formal discrimination, etc. But those were very real issues that affected every black person in the population without discrimination, right? And so no one has a right to want to monopolize those kinds of, community unrests that might turn fatal, because even as they erupt and develop, they don't develop as a result of some political instruction somewhere. I would like to believe. They develop and erupt as a result of organic issues on the ground that are real, that are material, that are affecting people in a very real way. And so we don't have a right to put labels on them and ownership or IP, and almost like I want to register the IP for June 16. You can't do that.
I understand. But I also kind of feel, I don't know if it's only me, but I've heard a couple of people also feel like we are getting trapped in this victimhood mentality of always celebrating holidays of when we were conquered, when bad things were done to us, as opposed to, yes, healing, yes, not forgetting the days, commemorations to happen, but still, like, what good does it bring our young people when they keep on being reminded of when they were conquered, on when they were killed, on when they were raped, on when the country was taken, on when they were massacred, when their parents were massacred, Wipatong, Sharpeville, Marikana, June 16, etc.
This is the thing. This is what I was saying earlier, that firstly, to commemorate them is not a bad thing, because, if you forget your history, you're likely to repeat those mistakes, even in your own private life. If you don't learn from your lessons, memorize the lesson, not the experience, which is what you're saying, but remember the experience that led to the lesson, but hold on to the lesson and move on and use that to modify your life, to make adjustments to your life so that your life can move forward. I fully agree. But it is important to commemorate. This is why in Western culture, there's the concept of museums. There's the entire creative sector has got the concept of galleries, art galleries, etc. We have literature, to talk about history. The Bible itself is like the oldest probably piece of literature that is allegedly based on whatever transpired in the world thousands of years ago, and people are using it today. Such an outdated book to justify and use it as a basis for them to exercise their spirituality within the Christian faith. The Jewish people have got the Torah, I think. The Muslims have got the Quran. I'm not sure what book Buddhists have, and I'm supposed to be a Buddhist. So there's nothing wrong, absolutely, with commemorating. I definitely don't, disagree with that. But what is wrong is exactly what we're talking about, fighting over who owns the rights to say, I created this, or I was instrumental in this, campaign and that campaign. That's not the point. The point is, what were the students uprising for? And then what's the principle of that? Because once we can learn to focus on the principle, we'll understand the lesson to be learned after that. Because this is your question is on point. If all of us understood that June 16 was about not necessarily even the Afrikaans language, it was really an economic, battle. Because if you couldn't speak Afrikaans, what was the result? You couldn't get a job when you got out of school. Those menial jobs that you could get, you couldn't get a job because you had to be able to speak Afrikaans. So it was an economic issue, right? As much as it was political. And it was a domination issue, discrimination, etc., etc. So if we were to use those lessons, what are the lessons we learned from June 16? How do they apply today? What can we do today to ensure that the youth are not finding themselves in the same battle? Because it's almost really the same. Yes, they've, post the negotiations, Afrikaans is now an official language. We don't vilify it and demonize it, and that's good, right? All our other, natural indigenous languages, native languages are also part of the official languages. But what have we really done with that fact? What have we done economically what is the economic impact of freedom of choice, for instance, right? So those are the lessons that the conversations now should be about, that to say, let's commemorate June 16, but here are the lessons that we've learned from that horrible experience. Here are the real reasons why the youth were fighting. Today, do those reasons still exist? And if they exist, why? I mean, it's how many years later, right? It's 47 years later, 48 years later. Why do we still have those conditions? We'll eventually come to the logical conclusion that the real reason students were fighting, and us as black people were really fighting, was for freedom, not for the right to vote. And indirectly, it wasn't really about a language per se. It was about the respect of who we are, the rights that we have inherently to speak the languages that we want to speak, our cultural rights, heritage rights. That was a very correct battle. And it's very important to teach all future generations about June 16 and all the other major massacres. That's critical. But it becomes irrelevant and stupid and almost useless to do that, as you say, if the population, or let me call us the beneficiaries of that struggle, are actually now worse off than perhaps the students in the townships of June 16 at the time, under, a leadership that happens to be black. There was also that black power thing around June 16. There was also that rise of the black power thing, because we all know the ultimate influencer of the June 16 was this, shall I call it, Pan-Africanist discourse that Steve Biko was championing. And he went from varsity to varsity, community to community, talking to black people about the importance of, being proud to be black. And it was a necessary, lesson for him to impart on black people at the time, consciousness really, to try and bring about within black people, because the fight against the system was really, really harsh those days. And really being black was literally a sin. I mean, so it was an important discourse to introduce at that time. And so all of that needs to be contextualized. So yes, somebody, like I said, might want to use their dominance. The ANC wanted to use their dominance to say, we lay claim on this entire June 16 battle. But we all know that it didn't belong to them. It didn't belong to any political party, because there weren't any political parties overtly. And in fact, to substantiate the point I'm making even further, I don't know if you'd remember this, but I know for a fact, because my family was very political. We didn't really, yes, we knew the name ANC. We also knew, I think, who else? PAC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Azapo.
We also knew, I didn't know Azapo, but I think other people did, right? And then, of course, there was the UDF, but we all understood UDF and the trade unions, all of them were supporting the cause under the ANC, right? But we actually didn't understand that they are separate organizations.
Yeah. Well, I didn't.
I'm glad you're saying that, because that was my experience and my interpretation. We really didn't understand. I think we only started to understand that there were different organizations when we were now leading up to 1994, and that shoddy so-called voter education was underway to teach, Abokoko how to vote, because they literally never voted, and everybody, right, who's black, except obviously colored people and Indians, did vote in their own constituencies. So the effect of, I suppose, maybe the reason why we then had to be taught about the different political parties is because democracy can't happen without competition, because it's a capitalist framework. The democratic order that we have is governed and ruled and established by the capitalist, framework. And so capitalism's main, I suppose, fundamental principle of existence is competition.
Let's move on to an issue that I think you didn't want to talk about the last time. It just came out this week that Mr. Ace Magashule has been fired out of the ANC. The previous time it was a suspension, but now it's been out. I think this week.
Yeah.
He's going to be, this coming week, hosting a press conference. And there's also a lot of rumors that he might just be joining the EFF. I'd like to hear your views on Mr. Ace Magashule being out of the ANC.
I don't see, it has no bearing on our lives. That's the sad part. None of the shenanigans that happen in political parties have a bearing on our lives as citizens. Because, for instance, all the criminal activity that Ace, led during his tenure, I think is it 15 years or longer, as the head of his party in the Free State, and then subsequently as a premier, led in the deterioration of Free State economically. Free State province today, really, I mean, since the current ANC has been in charge administratively and politically, in terms of government in the Free State for the last almost 30 years now, there's really only 3 economic sectors in the Free State. It's tourism, agriculture, and a little bit of mining. Yes, of course, there are other sectors, but they're not, a sector really only becomes critical to a province once it drives big numbers of employment, and it has a knock-on effect on other industries through its supply chain, networks and value chain. And so that man and the people that he led with, of course, because he was leading a cabinet, etc., regional structures that were leading municipalities, has completely led to the regression, which is destructive, of the quality of life of the people of the Free State. It's a fact. Today, Mangaung is not even, sometimes you go to Bloemfontein and you don't even recognize that you're in Bloemfontein if you still have the image of a more orderly and organized Bloemfontein. There's literally sewage on the streets. They are one of the provinces. There was a water report out recently that the Department of Sanitation nationally issued, doing water studies, checking the quality of water across, all municipalities, and Free State came out, in the bottom provinces in terms of water quality, right? So they're also one of the provinces that are under threat of potential cholera outbreaks because of the terrible state of their water infrastructure, because water infrastructure is very sensitive, very, very sensitive. If you don't do regular checks and maintenance and, with the whatever the engineering is that governs that space of water, which I would imagine would be, what is it? What would they call a water engineer? Hydrologists with qualified, hydrologists and people experienced in managing water systems. You really run the risk of making the entire population very sick. And it's a fact. In South Africa, there's a report that's out to that effect. So I don't think that any political party expelling anyone from their ranks, especially people who had an opportunity to go into government and lead and do the right thing. Any expulsion or joining of a political party has got no bearing on us. It's really none of our business. What we are interested in as citizens is, once you become a public representative, what is the impact of your tenure?
Yeah.
Right? The time that you spent in office, especially if you were governing. Right? Because if you are in the opposition benches, there's very little impact that you can possibly have because you're opposing. And the South African system doesn't have, even the coalitions, as you've seen, are extremely immature and kindergarten-like. None of the parties really make decisions in coalitions based on what is good for the citizens. We all know why they do it, because they're trading tenders and, fighting over the supply chain and the procurement budgets of those entities that they're presiding over. So I don't think ACE's expulsion has got nothing to do with us. Who he joins after the ANC has correctly gotten rid of him. By the way, it's correct for them to do that. But what is incorrect is for the ANC not to fire everybody else who is, looting and has been looting, even those who have now come out of positions and are no longer in those positions, because obviously they some people go back, some people don't. So, a crime doesn't die. If you looted public money in 1994, you should still be jailed today, because icala alboli, they can simply collect all that evidence, take you to court, and process you. So the only thing that is of interest to us is, because I think sometimes we fall prey and victim to the propaganda, machinery of political parties to distract you. The creation of excitement, and so now it's a campaign. The whole week, angeke silale, Ace has been expelled and he's joining this one and this and that. Look, it speaks for itself. We have ex-convicts as public reps in South Africa, because we have no criteria for who can go and sit on a public seat. We have no criteria at all, and it's a shame. So we have people who have looted, but other people find value in recruiting a person who has looted money, and it's known. And even if they've hidden the paper trail, because when you're in power, you have the right to control the finance office, the supply chain office. You can do a lot to go and get rid of hard evidence, right? But transactions have a paper trail, except for the cash ones. Even the cash one has a paper trail, because somebody must have withdrawn the cash to go and distribute it, right? So if proper investigation is done, you can actually find all these people and actually hold them accountable. So if someone, if I'm happy to associate myself or my organization or my company with a personality who really has a terrible standing in society, whose impact of his work, the total sum effect of the impact of his work is negative, and I'm proud to recruit such a person, what does that say about me? At some point we do, yes, there's no honesty in the political space, of course. You would know that if you go into politics and you're trying to be honest and do gooder and, just do what you are required to do and do the best you possibly can, you suck at it and you're not going to last. But, the evidence that our country is really going down the dogs in terms of ethics, it lies in this kind of behavior, where even though Ace is not in jail, but we all know he belongs in jail, right? We all know that under his stewardship, his province regressed, unemployment grew, poverty is a crisis in the Free State, a horrible crisis in the Free State. Like I said, they're left with really three central, core economic
Economies.
sectors. You can't survive on three economic sectors unless you have a smart, team economically that can make sure that each sector has a long value chain that has an impactful, knock-on effect. So for me, it's a non-starter of a conversation, and it's really a nauseating conversation as well. Because honestly, we are talking about people there are countries where you'll be beheaded for just stealing $1,000 from that government. I'm not saying that's what we should be doing, but for Pete's sake, we need to start taking consequence management a lot more seriously.
What should we be
It's
doing?
a B.
Yeah. Is that good luck?
It's good. It's very good luck.
Okay.
Yeah. So you shouldn't
Clearly, this podcast is about to blow up.
shouldn't kill bees.
Okay.
By the way,
Yeah.
they are under threat of being extinct. Sorry, I'm not digressing.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. So a bee, actually, just leave it alone, sit still, and it'll go away.
Okay, I get you. No, I hear you. What should we do though?
About the scum of the earth that has been raiding our coffers in government
What do we
without
do?
consequence. It's unfortunately.
Should we bring back the death penalty? Will it
Yes,
change
I'm
anything?
a death penalty proponent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm definitely a death penalty proponent. But of course, understanding that we don't make our own laws, and this is my song and dance every day. We don't make our own laws as citizens. We don't have a right even to submit a law or an amendment of a current law to Parliament. So for us to have the death penalty, we have to go through lengthy processes because, as you know, the current looters
Yeah.
always use our wishes, like, for instance, our wish to see the death penalty, because our crime is really extreme, right? Not our death rate, but our murder rate is 3 times that of America. The US, I'm talking about one country in America called the US of A. The US of A is over 300 million citizens. So it's a massive crisis that we are in. A country of 60 million people having a murder rate higher than that of a country with 315 million people. Yes, that's a simplistic comparison because we are different countries with different social and socioeconomic conditions and all of that, different bureaucratic structures, different governments, etc., etc. Yes, they also have their brand of corruption, but our brand of corruption is an African brand of corruption. It's completely destructive. It has a very negative impact on the entire economy, etc. So for us to have the reality of us bringing in the death penalty will mean that we need, like, one, those electoral reforms to happen because we still don't have proper electoral reforms. 2, for citizens to have an active, direct participation in lawmaking, because then it will be easier for us to lobby ourselves as citizens and mobilize ourselves outside of the interests of perhaps a political party or a big NGO funding agency that might come with its own, interests, hidden interests. We'd be able to do a genuine process if we have those electoral reforms. We have the 75-25 split in Parliament of individuals that were elected as individuals, not linked to a political party, directly accounting to citizens, and citizens being having access to these people and having meaningful access, because we don't have meaningful access to our government structures right now. The access that we have is managed by the political parties, right? They manage it, and they will pacify us with certain words and slogans and promises that are empty without really coming with tangible goals and targets. Say, okay, we're going to do this and that for you, and you can check up on the progress like this and like that. Should you not be happy with the progress, these are the channels of recourse, etc., until the problem is genuinely resolved without monies changing hands, etc. Because that's the main reason why you need political parties to be diminished in government, so that we can have direct say in what laws we want. And the death penalty is one that will take time to develop. But under the political party representation, party list, proportional representation system, we're not going to get it. We must just contend with that reality.
Let's get into the education now. Let's speak about education. What is the Bella Bill?
So the Bella Bill, okay, so I need to confess, I haven't read it in detail, and normally I will read a bill in details. I've had to go through the Health Act during the time when we were fighting, the imposition of the World Health Organization health regulations, the electoral bill, of course, a few other acts I'm au fait with. The on the education one, I'm not.
Okay, they say here.
I'm not fully au fait, but
Yeah.
just before you come in, it's the same principle as what was happening with the Health Act recently, a few years ago, when Parliament was trying to make amendments to the Health Act to basically give powers to the Minister of Health and the Department of Health and
I think
Parliament.
we spoke about it in Rosebank.
We did.
So I think it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago with Penuel.
Yes.
Remember we spoke about it?
We spoke about it.
So is it something similar? Because this one
is similar.
BELA, the Bella Bill, is the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill.
So,
Yeah, sorry.
so I'm aware of the regulations. I mean, not regulations, but components of the health of the Education Act that some parliament wants to make amendments to, quietly, secretly, without anybody knowing. But again, like I said, because we have a top-down process of lawmaking, and when I say lawmaker, I mean literally passing a law, right? Whether it's a bylaw in a municipality or it's a law that is coming out of a province through the very few provinces actually pass laws. Actually, I don't know of a province we didn't pass a law during my time when I was in the legislature in Gauteng, or parliament. So because it's top down, and not only that it's top down, there's no, let's say before the decision is taken to amend or introduce a new law, there isn't any public, consultation. Let's say engagement or communication with the public to say, this is what we're thinking of, start thinking while we're also working out the bureaucracy behind the scenes. So I have not read the nitty-gritties of it. I'm familiar, obviously, broadly with the Act, but I have not read the nitty-gritties except just the core areas that, some of the NGOs that have already started working in the space to mobilize people and sensitize parents especially. Actually, all citizens, not just parents and guardians, to say reject the attempts to give more powers, general sweeping, overarching powers to the minister in relation to the Act, because that will basically, once they make those amendments, those changes, it becomes very difficult to amend them and or rather to repeal them, which means to remove them. To delete them, it becomes a lengthy, very costly exercise. You have to go to the Constitutional Court. You have to get lobbyists to go to Parliament and lobby, and you have to get signatures from, a set number of people, and do your own. So the problem gets created at Parliament, and then solving it becomes our headache. And yet we have no levers. We have no access really to that bureaucracy in Parliament to actually solve, to repeal, to amend, to introduce a new law. It's very similar to the health amendment process.
I just want to give a big shout out to Big Liberty from the Big Liberty show on YouTube.
Yeah.
He stood up, I think it was in Parliament, and to voice his views in rejecting the bill. And he gave an interesting a comment there, and I just wanted to big him up for that, and just for the bravery of doing that. They're saying this brand new, these Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill B2 2022 proposes, number one, many controversial proposals that the public have opposed at every turn, granting open-ended powers to the minister to create regulations without describing procedures by which the proposed regulations will be enforced, which could provide a backdoor for comprehensive sexual education and mandatory vaccination. Number three, to enable government to dictate one-size-fits-all curricula, language, and admissions policy, and more, thereby centralizing control of all educational modalities, including home education, which are providing viable alternatives to the government school system. Number 4, criminalizing parents and sending them to prison for 12 months or charging them a hefty fine for even minor transgressions like forgetting to register their child in time. Can you imagine? Number 5, reducing the power of school governing bodies. So basically, government wants to take control of over our kids, over parents.
So the reason I was saying that it's exactly the same thing that they were doing with the health regulations, not the actual act itself, but the regulations that come out of the act. Because normally, you know what the capitalist funded institutions do, because government is a capitalist funded institution. Remember, it relies on the tax that it gets from business, right? And I'm saying business because majority people who are economically active are employed. And so if you're employed, you're not really a taxpayer. The taxpayer is your employer because you're paying the tax. If you are in the tax paying bracket, you're paying the tax because you're earning X amount of money, which SARS says from this amount you must start paying tax and submitting tax returns. But you're paying tax because you're employed. And the minute you stop being employed, you'll pay tax again once you bring in certain X number of revenue. So majority of the tax is coming from the capitalist framework, from businesses and big companies, large enterprises and institutions, even global institutions. And so those are really the people who are in charge and in power. And so with the reason I'm raising this is because every time there's an amendment to a law or an introduction of a new law, and I've said this many times, and I keep hearing people, because I do read some of the comments after some of my engagements, and I hear a lot of people ignorantly saying, oh, what is she talking about? She's saying laws are made with briefcases, being given to committee members or political parties as donations, etc. That is true. I stand by what I'm saying. You're never going to have hard evidence to this, right? Because these are the things that happen behind closed doors. You're never going to catch these people out giving each other monies in order to pass certain decisions in committees. Is because the reason I'm saying this is because they start with the pattern with how the capitalist control starts. It starts with 1-2 portions of the act. It's like, oh no, we just want to, amend these 4 aspects. Horrible aspects that even have an implication on sex education, right? Which is a big problem in our country because we know there's a lot of, underage sexual activity and alcohol activity. So they start with a few, and once they get it right, so it becomes a test. So they take these to Parliament. This is what we want you guys to put in the Education Act, because already big business that is involved in that has an interest, a commercial interest in the education sector, already knows why they want those amendments to push whatever it is that they want to push in the education sector. The same thing happened with the health. The health regulations.
So in other words, you're trying to say it's part of the New World Order.
Of course, it's all part of the New World Order, and it's always very shady, dodgy, underhanded dealings that follow or that precede these amendments, and these things will come up, after a while, once we've created the discourse, the proper discourse. I really think that we should maybe focus on this in perhaps maybe the next episode and really go into detail, because again, we need to encourage people to submit a rejection of this proposal. There hasn't been any consultation. I don't know whether people have gone to schools, because I don't have a kid who's in school anymore and I'm not really very actively involved with the schools, but there hasn't been any consultation. I don't believe there's any parent who has a child in school now who's even aware of this.
A lot of people, I think, are not aware. I was not aware of it as well up until just this past week.
And the biggest stumbling block is that, this information that comes out from the NGOs that are helping in the sector is constructive and it's good and we encourage it. But this information comes out in English, right? Distributed through, our WhatsApp or whatever other social media or email. Majority of the parents and guardians who have children at school probably, will not be able to understand this language easily and might not have access to data to be able to download the stuff, and will not even have data enough to vote, because obviously in that communique there's somewhere where you can actually vote and say and make your voice heard and say, no, I'm rejecting this proposal, right? Which is what is needed. But all of the fact that all of this is being done by the NGO is part of the curiosity of the situation, because why are we hearing about it for the first time only through, non-government organizations that are active in the education sector? Because before you can even take this to a committee or whatever in Parliament as an MP, you must have had a mandate from the people, which takes me back to what I was saying earlier, that we won't get the death penalty or any other law that we want, or we won't remove a law that we think is harmful to us until we have direct authority over what happens in Parliament, and until the mandate actually originally comes from us. So instead we get mandates that come from the top. We don't know what they're about. We don't know what influences them. We don't know what inspired the people who are actually pushing that agenda in that committee to actually make these amendments. It takes me back to many years ago when there was the bill, and I know it's very controversial, and I'm not saying I'm pro or against, definitely not. As a female, it affects me. But when there was the bill that permits, I think, a child at the age of 12 to have an abortion, that is something I'm completely against, without a parental consent. We still have that clause in the bill today. But I know majority of citizens do not want that clause in the law. But because we have no authority, we have no say, we have no... it's like we basically have no franchise when it comes to the laws that govern us. People have just accepted it. Said, okay, this is... And what has been the resulting effect of it? It has also legitimized statutory rape. It has legitimized molestation of girls.
Indirectly, yeah.
Because if you say to a child, when you're pregnant, you can actually have an abortion without my permission, you put it in the law, you are disempowering me as a parent to now intervene and say, how is my child pregnant? How did my child get pregnant? Like, how? This is a child, right? Who made this child pregnant? Like, the preceding conversation should be the statutory rape or violent rape. I should be opening a rape case and dealing with that. And as a family, then deal with what to do in the instance of now the child being pregnant at that age, and take a collective decision and manage the situation such that as the years go by, the child is protected. The mental health of the child, having experienced this trauma of the girl child, is also attended to now by the family. So the unintended consequences of laws like this are massive. They result in apathy amongst populations. Like, we end up just not having an interest in doing anything, because we are such, we are a herded nation. We are like cattle. We don't even know what the hell is going on. I mean, it's like with load shedding. We've been stuck with it since 2008, is it? Yeah, load shedding started in 2008. And it took us forever. It was only people in the energy sector who were, electrical engineers or active in the energy sector, who started talking about different options of being able to generate your own electricity if you have the money, etc. But majority of us really were
oblivious.
Yeah, and we didn't know what to do because we're so disempowered. Even if we know what to do, we don't know where to take our proposals, because even if you take your proposals further, they're not going to be attended to, and you'll have no recourse.
So guys, go to referendums.co.za. That's referendums with an S, referendums.co.za. Talks about the Bella Bill. The introduction here says, in general, the Bella Bill is not relevant to the future of education. There are major chasms between the current national education system and the fast-paced skills and newly developing careers in the working world. The Bella Bill will only make it harder to bridge these chasms innovatively, further throttling the country's economic development. There can't be no variety, no options. whatever that variety is, it should be acceptable to the people of South Africa and aligned with South African constitutional rights and any internationally recognized human rights, including the rights of a child. Amendments to the Bella Bill also need to address how the Department of Basic Education can be more inclusive of all learners and better aligned to the areas of STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, alternative modalities of learning, and future trends in education that are in step with local and global changes. To read the full bill in its current form, currently before Parliament, you just have to click. It's on the referendums homepage, referendums.co.za. Let's move on to the next issue now. Advocate Mama Busisiwe Mkhwebane, I think she claimed, I think it was a couple of days ago, claimed that the late ANC MP Mamatina Jomat Peterson offered to make her impeachment disappear. She also implicated Chief Whip Pemi Majodina and Inquiry Chair Richard Janchi. The conversations allegedly took place between her husband, Mr. David Skosana, and the late MP in March. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, can I just say something very quick? Just a cautionary note, not really a cautionary note, on the basic education law bill. I think the people who need to be let me not give weight. Everybody's input is equally important. But I think that's one of the implications of the bill is that there's a huge part of the component of the population that now wants to do homeschooling, and others who want to do alternative curricula for their children, because it's a globally known fact, except here in South Africa, that the knowledge that we are being taught now in the formal education system, whether it's primary education or secondary education, is at least, in terms of the content, it's at least 200 years old. We're learning content which is like extremely outdated, right, and not relevant to our lives, especially in South Africa, because mathematics has dropped. So I think those parents who want to do homeschooling, who want to start doing independent education, introducing progressive curricula, and it's mostly the anti-vaxxer community, of course, need to make sure that they respond to this
amendment bill.
Exactly, and to respond to it and actually reject it.
Yeah.
On, condolences to the family of the late Tina. And I don't know her, so I can't say much about her. And I don't agree with the adage that says you can't speak ill of the dead in African culture. Spiritually, I see why, but I don't agree. I mean, as a minister, she wasn't very exemplary, but we send condolences to her family nonetheless, and friends and everyone, out of respect, really, for her being and her soul having existed on earth. I just think, again, firstly, that it's illegal to record someone without their knowledge. I don't know if this has been discussed. I've been listening to, I think, a couple of mainstream radio stations talk about this. And nobody touches the fact that what Busisiwe Mkhwebane is doing now is just this, what she's been doing all along, right? Frustrating the process, not allowing, she doesn't report to herself. She might have been leading a Section 9 institution, right, that has a lot of power to stand independently, and that even has her recommendations are binding. You can't even take them to the Constitutional Court, for instance. Well, you can take them to Constitutional Court if you disagree at some point. You should always have the right to go to the Constitutional Court as a last recourse. But she, as somebody who's supposed to be a lawyer, I'm very surprised that she went and released to the public. I don't know how she released these. I didn't really follow it to that point. I only started noting the story after it hit, headlines. But you cannot release audio recordings or audio conversations or any recording, whether it's AV, which means a video, or radio, plain simple audio, to even a third party, without the permission of the person, of all the parties that are in that recording. That's what the law says. It's under the Electronic Communications Act. Anyone who wants to go and look for that clause, you can look for it under the Electronic Communications Act. So you are not allowed, which is why, let me give you a practical example. And I know a lot of our young viewers or followers and your subscribers will probably relate to this. Like in all public areas or many public areas where there's infrastructure, there are cameras. The law requires every building owner, property owner, or manager to put up signs indicating that there are cameras or CCTV. That's what we used to call it. I don't know if they still call it CCTV footage.
Just to come in there, it's
Yeah.
actually under the Poppy Act.
As well.
Yes, what is the Poppy Act regarding recording of conversations? The Poppy prohibits processing of personal information without consent of the party or the subject. In terms of the POPIA, processing of personal information includes collecting, receiving, recording, organizing, retrieving, using such information, distributing, or
Publishing.
making such personal information available.
That's on the personal information front, right? So
Yeah.
you're not allowed to take according to POPIA, you're not allowed to take my information without me consenting. Two, then you can't distribute it, etc. Share. But now I'm specifically referring to electronic communications,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Which is part of, by the way, thank you for that. Which is part of the same family. It's all under communications. So
Yeah.
the Electronic Communications Act talks about what we're doing now. We're using electronic devices to record and then communicate, right? Because after the recording, you broadcast. So the Electronic Communications Act is very clear. You cannot record, take a picture. It's actually illegal for somebody, a simple picture. You cannot take a picture of me without my permission. One, just taking the picture. Secondly, then distributing that picture. So you've done two illegal things. You take a picture of me without my permission, it's illegal. You distribute my picture, it's illegal. And so I'm coming to that fact that this lady is supposed to be a lawyer, and she distributed recordings. I don't want to deal with the contents because like that whole silliness that's happening there in Parliament and the lack of justice and the lack of accountability, the lack of recourse, the lack of consequence, because Ubusisiwe is basically just like Jacob Zuma. They're just refusing to be held accountable. She's just an example. Ace, the whole Katut, it's the same. I don't know. Those people are just a big disgrace. I have very little respect, no respect for her. And I'll never have any respect for her because I actually believe that she did her work in a way that puts a person like me in a very difficult position. I'm an activist in the women's space. And as a woman being an underdog everywhere we go, we are underdogs. We are the weaker sex. Economically, we are, under siege. We're just you have to fight for your space and put your best foot forward, man. She never put her best foot forward in her work. Yes, there may be these political wranglings. She was also very politically engaged. With mainstream politics. Everybody knows that she was married to a certain faction of the governing party. All of that is really rather disgusting, and so I'm really not impressed with her. My opinion of her is really not a very flattering one. But I want to stick to this issue that I'm quite disgusted with the fact that she had the nerve to, as somebody who is legally trained, from what she says, I don't know if she was legally trained, but her name has got a prefix that says advocate, so I'm assuming she's legally trained. And she should, and somebody who was a public protector, and I'm saying was because really, she should have been impeached long ago, that she can violate the rights of another female. Without the veracity, without us knowing the veracity, which means, is this true or is it not? Because it still needs to go to court. She needs to prove what she's saying in court. She shares an audio recording of a person who didn't know she was being recorded, was not informed, who has now passed on. So the violation is on so many levels. And then she should know. So she's playing political games. That case that she's calling, she says she's opened a case. When it ends up in court, any half-decent lawyer will argue the issue of admissibility of that audio in court. Finish and clear, and it will end there. The case will die at that point. Because any judge or any prosecutor rather, right? Okay, there'll be a prosecutor because her husband opened the case of the bribe, right? But now to prove the bribe, they need the audio. That audio will not be admissible in court because she will have to prove that the late Tina gave permission to be recorded. I don't know if she can prove that. Secondly, because recording is one part of the law, which is what I was raising about the Electronic Communications Act. Then the POPIA Act comes in. Then she'll have to prove that the late Tina gave her permission to distribute that audio. Her husband, rather. Not her husband, sorry. Because it's her husband who opened the case according to what she said. So I don't know if you're following me. So court processes are very, very technical and very, very phase-driven. You know, they are almost on a staggering basis. You have to start here, move there. They're very logical. They're based on rationale. So the first point is to say, what is your case? Here's my case. Do you have evidence? Yes, I have evidence. Here's my evidence. Is your evidence admissible? I mean, come on. I would imagine, I'm not a lawyer, but I think this is like law 101. If your evidence is not admissible in court, it's not admissible, which means you cannot admit it, which means you cannot submit it to court as evidence. It will not stand the test. So the whole case will be thrown out. I'm telling you right now.
Is our judiciary captured?
I mean, in a capitalist society, are there any organized institutions that don't have an element of capture? Of course they'll have an element of capture. With every government that comes in, the judiciary suffers some form of capture. Right? It's the same as government employees. The employees at ESCOM, they are the best example I can think of. And there's one now, finally, they actually convicted somebody for creating ghost employees. You know, people in HR in government have learned something called creating ghost employees
so that
to
they
steal
can
money.
get paid.
There's somebody now, I've heard the Hawks got a
Okay.
successful conviction, but they couldn't send her to jail because jail is overpopulated. So they had to suspend the sentence until they can make space. Anyway, so I'm making an example with ESCOM employees who are the most highly paid employees in the whole country.
I didn't know
Doesn't
that.
matter what they do. Apparently, all major ESCOM employees earn a minimum of 70,000 rand a month.
Okay.
I mean, this will include people who are doing basically nothing there all day in administrative tasks, etc. This is what is said out there, right? But you will have a form of capture in any capitalist society, right, of major institutions that are in charge of, obviously, the courts, the police, the entire framework of the criminal justice system, but also government employees get captured. Like I'm making an example now with ESCOM employees. There's an allegation that, and I think you've seen it, I forget the guy's name. Actually, the name wasn't communicated. I was reading an article in the Daily Maverick. Actually, I think it's an openly known fact that a very senior executive at ESCOM is actually the guy who's been responsible for damaging physical infrastructure, and they now have evidence, and I think they're either moving in on the guy or close to moving in on the guy, right? Now, if that is not a form of capture, somebody who can be embedded in a state entity as critical as the electricity generating company, belonging to government 100%, can operate for 15 years, because I'm assuming this guy has been there since the load shedding problem started, and his job is to take instructions from whoever he takes instructions from, and his cartel, to say, damage that power station, damage that for procurement, right? For the emergency procurement, because they can charge crazy amounts, because now this has broken down, it's a weekend, I need to bring it to you on weekends, I quadruple my prices or whatever, right? So there will be an element of capture. I mean, this is a common phenomenon in modern day governments across the globe. I was reading something about the problem in America as well in the judiciary. Lots of allegations of its capture. So each new term of public reps in office, each new term of a president, let's put it that way, or a mayor or whatever, the capture just takes on a new face, a new shape. Maybe there's dealings behind so there will be a certain aspect of capture in the judiciary. There are cases that have been proven. I mean, I just can't think of one now off the top of my head, but there are cases that, have been either overturned because of really crazy judgments that were not rational, that didn't make sense. That would be an indication of capture, right?
What do you think of Phala Phala? Because it seems to not be going away. And if judiciary is captured, who has captured it?
Well, the judiciary doesn't. I haven't followed the Phala Phala thing very well, except for the sort of headline activities, which means, the I think they set up, it wasn't a commission, but they'd set up a special purpose vehicle to deal with like an inquiry, I think at parliamentary level. And they were supposed to do various other things. But as far as I know, as a criminal matter, it has not as yet, as a criminal allegation, it has not as yet ended up in the courts. So for now, the courts can be excused, because remember, the case needs to end up in court for the judge or whoever to preside and make a decision. I think I saw something where the General Libya, the head of the Hawks, was confirming that they are now investigating it, that it's now in their hands. I think, I stand corrected, but I'm pretty sure I read that sometime this week. And so I always find it very difficult to comment, like for instance with the Busisiwe Mkhwebane. I can comment on what I know. Like for instance, I know for a fact on the issue of admissibility. I would be very shocked if she can provide evidence that that's an admissible recording as her key evidence, right? But of course, she also has her husband as the sort of witness, so that's also another evidence minus the recordings. So same with Phala Phala. For instance, what was the allegation on Phala Phala? That they found dollars or whatever currency they found in a certain property belonging to the president's private property. All of those are the allegations, right? And then they released video footage, allegedly, and I'm saying allegedly based on what I said earlier, based on CCTV camera footage gotten from where? From the same house. So there could be an issue of, it's a very complex matter, because you have to, again, prove that, okay, so when there's a crime committed, I think they can negotiate the issue of admissibility at that level. I'm not too sure. But there's going to be a lot of technical issues surrounding that recording itself to prove its authenticity. Again, the Electronic Communications Act will come into play, POPIA, etc. Because if I extract a recording from your house illegally, again, that becomes also, for instance, if I was the owner of that property, I would also have opened a case against, firstly, there was a robbery. Secondly, who is in control of that CCTV footage? Where is it maintained? Where's the footage and all the recordings? Where are they held? Who has authority? Who owns it? The owner of the property. Who can distribute it unless there's a crime, etc.? So maybe in the case of a crime, they can exclude that. I don't know. But I think only a thorough investigation and an objective investigation will help. Because the problem with such cases is that the way it is handled, like I mentioned with Busisiwe, the handling of the information and the data surrounding the case, how it's handled or mishandled, often becomes a problem for the matter by the time it gets to court. That is why often you'll hear the police saying, I can't comment, it's sub judice. Sub judice just simply means it's in court, and once it's in court, or there's a case opened already. So the minute there's a case opened, everything you say becomes legal, has an impact on the final outcome, can either derail the case, can either get you an adverse, can get you a judgment that is not in your favor. And so you are always advised, which once you've opened a case, shut up. Don't talk about it. Keep as much of the information to yourself as possible. Why? You're sanitizing the space, the data. You're preserving it so that when it gets to court, it's admissible, it's not tainted, and it has not prejudiced. There's two parties. There's the one who says you did this, there's the one who says I didn't. So you are not allowed to prejudice each other. There's rules around these things. And so for me, on the basis of how that whole case was publicly handled, it was obvious that the intention, exactly like Busisiwe Mkhobane's intentions, the intention was really just to use it as a propaganda tool to get sympathy and to dupe the public into your version. Otherwise, why would you discuss such, a sensitive matter like a president holding money allegedly to the tune of, I don't know how much they were accusing him of having in his possession. Was it over 100,000? It was 500,000 US dollars.
I think it's about, I don't know.
It was
Actually,
about
let me say I don't know. Let me not
Was it
mention
500?
figures.
No, I think, because it came up to about 16 million rand or so. So it was about 500, approximately
more.
500,000 US dollars. I'm talking the formal allegation.
Oh, okay.
There was an allegation that he's got X amount of dollars, which is illegal if he has. And I think for me, the case is also already made easier by the president. Because remember, Cyril Ramaphosa is not, I don't know whether he practiced as a lawyer, but I know he studied law and he has a law degree, he finished it. So he has an understanding. I mean, we might underestimate him because he's a, a bit of a, he comes across as a gentlemanly type of person, like he's gentle and soft. Of course, that doesn't mean he's not otherwise devious or whatever, but he comes across, as a respectful person, etc. And that often can play tricks on opponents. They can rush towards something and he can respond much slower, and that often plays to his advantage. The only thing I see playing in our favor as the public is that he admitted having money. That's it. He didn't admit to the rest of the criminality of the money, right? The one criminality is the fact that he was in what's the word? He was what's the there's an English word I'm looking for when you are operating outside of the law. That he was, let me say, partly guilty of holding on to currency, foreign currency, without reporting it, because that's what you're supposed to do. So that part he has already admitted to it. It's publicly known. I think he was interviewed and he admitted. He said, no, yes, I did have this kind of money because there was a sale. And obviously we all know that most of these sales of our animals is done in foreign currency, right? That's the norm, because it's an international market, right? So, animals are normally bought cross borders, right? And so maybe if it was a South African buyer, probably that person would have given rands, right? But you can buy animals across borders. There's laws that govern it. And so that's the only thing that I think for me is an obvious and I can comment on, because he admitted to it. He admitted to having the currency. He did not admit to having that money having acquired the money illegally. He admitted to the money reaching his property based on a sale, which was the core business of that property, right? Because it's a game farm, they do sell game, right? And operating in cash is actually normal in that industry, by the way. Even in farming, a lot of farmers, as far as I know, don't actually use EFTs and stuff when they sell cattle. Maybe now it's different after all the farm killings, which is why you had that spike of farm killings, because mostly it was about, you'd find that when there was an attack on farmers, it would be after a sale. So people would know that this farmer sold X amount of crop or cattle or whatever, livestock. And so on average, they have so much money on them yet. They have not yet banked it, because that's very normal in the game and the farming industry. Whether it's correct, I'm not here to discuss that, but it's a normal practice and everybody in farming knows that. And so it only stands to reason what the implication will be, right? What precedence has been set before, whether he will actually resign as a president of the country just on the basis that he held foreign currency on his property for X number of days or months or whatever. I don't know how long it was. And therefore, and maybe did not, if he had corrected it as well, SARS might also have a say, because if you are caught, in a crime, but you try to fix it and admit to it, there might be leniency. I don't know. But Mina, I'm looking at it very technically, and I'm not excited by the fact that people want to politicize an issue that is actually very, very serious, because the president is the first citizen of the country. And it doesn't happen with us, of course, but the first citizen of the country must be the first one to obey the laws of the country.
Talking about the first, the number one citizen of the country, his presidential plane is currently stuck in Warsaw, Poland. And I think him and I don't know if it's his cabinet, some members of his cabinet and some African leaders are going to Ukraine to go. I don't even know what they're going to negotiate about.
What are they doing? I mean, look, as Africans, like for real, I mean, our problem is very deep. And I think, as you were saying earlier, isn't it about time that we start to focus on solving we know what our problems are, and constantly complaining and moaning and rehashing them is just not going to help. This is a classical example of why we are not moving forward in this continent. One, just from what I read in an article, I think EWN, where they're talking about this plane at is it Chopin Airport in Poland, Warsaw? The reason the plane is being held, right, officially by the Polish authorities, obviously we know the real reason, right? But the technical reason they're giving is that they need to, the arms, there's arms and there's ammunition on the plane, not to cause alarm. There has to be, because the president is traveling to a war-torn area, and so he's traveling with a big security detail. So his security detail is on the plane with their, the arms and ammunition, whatever they have to carry, as part of their protection gear. And that's not an illegal thing. But obviously, when you carry arms, you need to have the necessary approvals, whatever, right, in each country. So Poland is saying, no, we haven't cleared those arms, etc. Remember, this comes on the back of the allegation that, actually, it's not an allegation. I think it's a fact by now.
Why would you say it's a fact? That we're supplying Russia with arms?
I don't know. Right?
Why
There's
would
an
you
allegation.
Are you saying that's a fact?
No, I'm thinking it might be a fact. Was
No,
it not
I
confirmed?
don't think so. No.
So there was no confirmation that there was a supply of arms.
The
Or
person
it's an
backtracked.
allegation.
The person backtracked.
Or
the
they
person who had
withdrew.
said
Okay,
that.
I didn't
Yes,
follow
he
it up.
withdrew, yeah.
Okay, fine.
It's
So
an ambassador.
It's not a fact, but I'm saying it comes on the back of that story, right? And so you can sort of fairly say the Polish people have some sort of justification for stalling releasing the plane.
Ukraine.
But this is the thing, right? So I was just dealing with why bastakile, because Nami, I didn't understand until I read that part that, okay, Baba miselu good bafunu clearer from a security detail point of view. But here's the question. What are we doing? Actually, what are we doing getting ourselves involved on any side? And I think we've had this conversation many times, yeah? On any side of this war. And I'll tell you why. And it's so amazing, because the people who justify taking Russia's side in particular are the so-called lefties, the so-called socialists, the so-called communists. Firstly, they don't even know what communism is. They have no conceptualization of it. Or socialism, for that matter. There's people who think giving you a grant from government is socialism. No, that is not socialism. Socialism talks about the equitable sharing of the economy across the value chain, equal pay for equal work. It talks about productivity. It doesn't talk about me sitting at home and getting money for free from taxes that are paid by UTJ Spoon Nabangan back. That's not socialism. Socialism talks actually about how can we all communally benefit from all our resources, and then we remove unemployment. Actually, socialism is more about work. It's more about it's an economic policy framework, actually, the socialist. It's not about grants and giving people free business, like a whole bastardized version of what socialism is. And this narrative that we are siding with Russia, lalela, both the East and the West, China, Japan, Russia, the east of Europe, the Central Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, Southeast Asia, the entire Northern Hemisphere, and even Australia, I can add Australia into that bunch, right? Are actually wanting our resources because they need them, besides wanting them.
What you've just said, listen to this.
It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap.
Voila.
That's the message.
Mic drop. So, sometimes when an economist explains it to you, they make it more complex. It's simple. Gyabanda manje, it's winter. We are in winter now in Joburg. And I don't know if Cape Town is more cold than us, but yeah, like we've really had it bad. So what do you use to heat? So firstly, a human being, unlike animals, let's start there. We need to keep warm because our skins don't have fur all over it to keep us warm, are much thinner than animals, etc., etc. So we literally would become extinct if we didn't have heating literally. You need heating to cook, but you need it mostly for your body. You need to drink hot water if you want a healthy body, not cold water. So we need to keep warm just for our survival. Now put yourself in the shoes of Europe. Northern Europe, okay, all of Europe actually. They've possibly, I don't know, I haven't read any research about how much minerals they still have under their soil, but yes, they did have some gold. Russia, they did have coal, they did have a lot of these minerals that we have, they actually had, but in small quantities from what we understood. And this is why they had to come to actually why Europeans even started so-called exploring in the 1400s or 1200s, whenever they started, right? It started with the Roman Empire. By and large, Europe was looking for food and energy before the gold issue and all of that, right? Before gold replaced the bartering system as a trading, and then obviously they started digging up their own gold to the point where they probably depleted their gold reserves, whatever they knew was available. Maybe there's some that they don't know about. But it's an issue of survival. We have all the resources. China doesn't have. China buys coal from us. They've always bought coal from us. China, and I really, really want this to be repeated, if possible. China, by the way, was supplying the apartheid government with guns. So I always want to understand, and this is a fact, you need to get a book called Apartheid Guns. Yeah, it's a book that was published. If you can please look it up in the meantime. South African authors co-authored it. White guys, by the way, if race has anything to do with it. And they were sharing all the gory details about why it's so important for us today, all of us as South Africans, to start understanding the hypocrisy of the global economic framework, right?
It's called Apartheid, Guns and Money, A Tale of Profit by Henny van Vieren.
That's
I'm
the guy.
going to go read it. Sorry, go ahead.
That book, actually I must get it back from a friend. I borrowed a copy of mine to a friend. That book will explain a lot of stuff that we as black people need to understand and know, and just start to digest. This thing that there's an East and a West fight, firstly, it's nonsense. There is no such fight. There's an imperialistic warfare in the world where imperialism, or rather capitalism, has reached a point of maturation now. And when capitalism matures, what it does, it self-destructs. And how do you see the self-destruction of capitalism? You start first seeing it by the cyclical recessions. You know them as they call them economic meltdowns or economic recessions. They used to happen on an average of every 20 years. But we in South Africa, since
2008.
Since 2007, right, when the global so-called recession, obviously the recessions will be global because the economy is mostly controlled, by the US because they're the biggest economy. And they still are the powerhouse for many, many reasons, by the way, however much we might criticize them. So definitely when their markets are rocked or their economy is rocked, it does impact the rest of the world because the dollar and all of that. Now, imperialism has no color. It has color to us in South Africa because we had racial discrimination for a very long time, and Africans are colonized. So we tend to think in race terms every time. When we think of a capitalist, we think of a white person. Of course, capitalism is still white, predominantly. But the globe, the world over, its whiteness is reducing at whatever scale. Because now you have China, you have Korea, you have Indonesia, you have Southeast Asia, basically, that has burgeoned to the extent that I don't know if this is true, but you are now starting to see individual wealth starting to transfer to black hands, and I mean in relation to the eastern populations, right? And even in Africa, by the way, we have our fair share of individuals who are benefiting from the capitalist framework, billionaires, etc. Some without doing it, so-called legally, the way the rest of us are supposed to operate. But the reality is that you're in an imperialism phase of the world where capitalism is now collapsing at a faster rate. And when that happens, the elite, the global elite, the capitalists who own all the money, either as individuals or institutions, start to now fight over territory to grow their base. And that is why now we are in this fashion of talking about billionaires, no longer about the institutions that those billionaires are running. We talk more about the individual billionaire than the institution that makes them these billions, the non-profit organizations that they hide their money through, and the companies that they use to make these super profits, and the dividends and all of that they get. So this fight about West and East is not a realistic fight. It's a nonsensical fight. Africa has no business at all, and I really need to be properly understood. Africa has no business fighting over who's my best friend. It's like being, and I'm sorry if, where most of us are victims of sexual violation. So if it's offensive, it will first be offensive to me. But I apologize to those people who might find it extra offensive. It's like being gang raped. And then after the gang rape, I choose which rapist was, do I prefer, is more lenient. I know it's crass, but I have to make a crass example in order to get the message home. All of them want our resources. China was very much engaged with the apartheid government. The Chinese government was many governments. Then there was the issue when there was the fight, I think it was the ANC that was leading it, that even led Owar Tambo to go to the UN and actually make public pronouncement about how the ANC fully supports the New World Order in the 70s. Can't find that video on the internet anymore. I used to have it. They've taken it out. I don't think he, at the time, Shame, understood, to his credit, really what the New World Order was in the 1970s when he made that speech. But when they went, begging and asking for the UN and all the global forces to support South Africa by, imposing sanctions on all the countries that are trading with the apartheid government, just to put pressure on them, China didn't succumb to that. China was definitely not one of the countries who agreed to impose sanctions. It was all quiet. You didn't know about it, but they were out of the radar. But there were lots of business dealings with the apartheid government. And I'm raising that as an example. Even Russia, for that matter, because I remember just from when I was studying radiography at Joburg Jain and Wits Technikon, I know that the Department of Health, the government at the time, because it was during just before '94, used to boast about how the nuclear medical nuclear sector that the apartheid government had developed in South Africa. Nuclear medicine, called nuclear medicine. There's a division of, when they do chemotherapy and all of that. And there's also a part of nuclear medicine that helps. Is actually, I think chemotherapy falls under nuclear medicine, right? And so Russia also traded with the apartheid government. Didn't they buy is it the Roy Falk, for instance, that army military helicopter? I could be wrong. I think they may have purchased it from the apartheid government because it was created by the apartheid government. So the point I'm trying to make is that we as black people today need to wise up. Not black people in political parties, us as the citizens, so that we can make informed decisions. What Africa needs to do and what South Africa needs to do is to, on a sliding scale, reduce the amount of minerals that we are exporting. We need to start reducing. I know there was a time when there was talk of, I think Rwanda is doing it. I'm not too sure if it's Rwanda, but I know there's an African country that's starting to do it. There was a discussion, a very progressive discussion to say, let's have an African agreement first, trade agreement to say, we have one agreement around how we treat our minerals because they are not renewable. I mean, they're going to rebuild again after 1 million years or whatever. I don't know how long it takes to form gold underground and coal, etc. Let's have a generic agreement as African countries to say, when we export, from what we have taken out, we export only X amount and we cap it. The rest of what we take out must remain in the country, must be processed here from A to final goods. You can't take all sectors, but we can share sectors. We've had this discussion as well. One part of Africa can manufacture this, another part of Africa can manufacture that, this and that, and then we just exchange the raw material amongst ourselves. I think in less than 10 years, maybe even 5 years, if you have super efficient people who are proper, entrepreneurial minds leading these programs, to just do away with poverty in Africa. You can do away with poverty in Africa just by beneficiating our natural and mineral resources, and get out of this illusion that, oh no, we're going with the East because the East is. No one is going to give you a better deal. Where's the better deal with the East? I've never heard an argument that comes from the proponents of this argument that BRICS, for instance, is going to give us loans at a lower rate than the World Bank, or IMF, which is part of the World Bank, or what do they? Yeah, it's IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Is there such a thing? Maybe I'm stupid. All I'm saying is that, can we start to become realistic? We have 24 conflict areas in Africa, and I can read out the countries to you right now. I've got them on a list. We have 24 countries in Africa that have that are in conflict, right? That are either in an arms-led conflict, because conflict is divided, that are in an arms-led conflict, or just an unrest, but unrest that makes it difficult for the country to operate. Like, for instance, when we had the looting in 2021, that was a conflict situation, right? There weren't people with guns attacking the army and all of that, but that was a conflict situation. So you have 24 such areas in Africa that are in conflict. And some of them, and I'll call them out very fast. It's Algeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Libya, Mali, Mauritania, Mozambique, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, Tanzania, Togo, Tunisia, and Uganda. 24 countries in conflict. That's more than half of the countries, because I think we have 52 or 51 states.
Yeah.
What are you doing getting involved in the wars in Europe when you can't solve base? Here is Zimbabwe. Ixakile is Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, arguably, I think we have more gold than them, but I just think it's because nobody's taking the time from, the geology departments of government to actually go and assess how much gold do we really have. But arguably, Zimbabwe has the highest gold reserves in the world. That's the debate out there. Yeah, there are other countries, I think, that might have
DRC.
Islands and stuff, but that's the argument. But essentially, it means us and Zim and maybe other countries in SADC put together obviously have the highest gold reserves.
Yeah.
Just that one mineral alone can create employment for everybody and create productive citizens that are self-sufficient, independent, capable of making their own decisions, capable of influencing laws, capable of studying, ubugebengu, and step in and stop parliament when they do all these crazy things where they want to pass draconian laws. We have absolutely no business. Why can't they just refuel that plane and bring it back? I don't understand. What authority does Cyril Ramaphosa or any of the presidents that have organized themselves to go to Ukraine or to go to Russia under the pretext of helping them to solve their problems?
There's also another rumor, but I think that'll be a conversation for another day, because we have to wrap it up now because of time. The rumor that is out there, allegedly, Russia has been sending out messages, and apparently there's also videos online. Uguti, they are capturing, but in capture labs of human trafficked children's organs. That's a conversation for another day.
How terrible.
But anyway, thank you very much this Monday. So I'm looking forward to another episode.
Thank you. I'm also looking forward to it.
Lots to talk about. I'm still promising you guys who have been asking for us to dissect the South African Constitution. I'm still promising you that episode that is coming. We have to. I think now we have to deliver it. They've been asking for it for over a year now.
Do you think that should be the next one?
I think so.
The Constitution is broad. We need to get some more feedback in terms of which sections. Then what we can do is we can highlight maybe the top 5 most popular ones, because it's varied. It's got different sections, different chapters. It's very engaging, and so we can't do all of it.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to invite a constitutional law expert.
That would be dope, and we can even do it in parts.
Oh yes.
Over a couple of episodes also.
That actually would be nice.
Because these videos are gonna exist forever, just to make it easier for everybody else. Because I just wonder how many South Africans out there even know the Constitution itself.
So that's a good idea. Maybe that should actually just be a permanent feature of every time we have a discussion, we have one part of the Constitution. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that'll be great.
Until we've
Very educational.
gotten to the back of it.
Yeah.
Can I ask, why are people wanting to understand the Constitution?
I think majority of them is younger people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who
And I think,
find it difficult to read it for themselves and interpret it. Yeah. I would
Yeah.
imagine it's the
Yeah.
interpretation.
yeah. Because
Okay.
nami ngimdala ngingaga, there's a lot of things that I still don't understand.
Yeah, Nami, it took me years of activism to actually fully grasp and fighting all the time with people and threatening. I've threatened somebody now with constitutional court again. Angazi ngiyithatha phi, 500,000 yobuya lapha.
Sis Mandisa. Last it was Unisa. Now there's how's that coming
Iwile
along?
ke leyo.
Oh,
No, it's
is it?
done. It's done.
Okay.
It's between me and my lawyer now. We're having intellectual arguments because he wants to take a different approach. I'm just suing them. I told him, I said, listen, when all of this is said and done, I need to sue them now. For real.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you on the next episode. Virtual Mkuku.